Hey, welcome back to HackerCon. And with us is Dr. Amit Elazari, who will be talking to us about the evolving security policy landscape and how it impacts you. Amit, take it away.
Thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to be here with you today. And I will be talking with you a little bit about the security policy landscape. I'm going to be building upon Holly's presentations from before. And I'm going to be sharing a unique case study of a policy project that evolved into Disclose.io and some of the recent landscape developments we've seen around safe harbors and kind of how it inspired me. And hopefully it will inspire you as well. So starting with a little bit of a disclaimer, because I am trained as a lawyer, as you will hear, my doctoral degree is in the law from UC Berkeley. But today I'm going to be talking with you about mostly my prior work, and this presentation is my own opinion, it's not legal advice. And I thought that a proper disclaimer would be appropriate to start kind of a legal-centric talk. So a little bit about my story, and I would just add another quick disclaimer. I actually looked at Harley's talk today, which was brilliant. And I have reshuffled all my slides and I've kind of changed the narrative because I believe Harley has given us a lot of the background. And I want to focus really on one of the case studies in the story behind Disclose.io to give you a perspective before you're going to hear more details about it later from Chloe. And I'm going to start with my personal story. So my name is Amit Elazari. I pursued my doctoral degree in the law at UC Berkeley. I'm originally from Tel Aviv. That's the accent that you're probably noticing. I'm Israeli. And I came to Berkeley in 2016 to really focus on technology law. And I was always fascinated about this interaction between the legal landscape and technology and intellectual property, patents, copyright, Computer Fraud and Abuse Act related issues, computer crime and privacy. And specifically, I studied how they interact with the fine print. 2016, I'm coming to Berkeley, I'm starting to work on these issues. And I hear a lot about friendly hackers from my sister, Karen Elazari, who you might know from her famous TED Talk about hackers as the internet immune system. And she really inspired me by talking about security researchers and some of the considerations, including about these issues of, legal considerations. And at the time, I was really studying this interaction between contracts and laws and intellectual property. And she was talking about bug bounties, and it kind of inspired me to look at the legal landscape of bug bounties. Now, this is 2017, 2016. I'm just starting to look at that landscape. And I ended up conducting the first legal survey of what type of terms and conditions we can find in bug bounties, and what are the potential legal implications that are stemming from that interaction, right? Where the contract landscape is interacting with anti-hacking laws and this concept of security research and crowdsourced security research and bug bounties. And I discovered interesting things. And again, this is my prior work. My first paper on this was published in 2017. And I gave a number of talks, including a DEF CON on this. And one of the things that I've discovered that there is an opportunity to shape the landscape by creating one set of language that would encapsulate this notion of the safe harbor, that would address some of the legal implications and the legal concerns using the language of the terms of use in the contract. Now, at that time, I'm starting to socialize my research. My sister is really inspiring me to come and talk with the community. I'm going to DEF CON, I'm going to Black Hat, I'm going to RSA, and with the support of the Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity at Berkeley, I began to speak about this opportunity to create a common language harbors in bug bounties in vulnerability disclosure programs. And I get the question of, is it really an issue? We've seen researchers in bug bounties in those kind of settings, potentially, getting threatened with legal threats. And Kevin comes out with his own story around his interaction with the DJI bug bounty, and with his tweet sharing his story about how he walked away from a $30,000 approved bounty because of potential legal issues. And there are two sides of the stories, and I encourage you to go online and look at the different reporting. By the way, DJI now, they do have a safe harbor in the bug bounty, but Kevin coming up with the story 2017 really inspired me to move forward with this initiative of creating the standardized legal language. And I continue to, get inspired by the community because I know these issues matter. And the reason we know these issues matter is because bug bounties has have moved us really towards a path forward by creating those private mechanisms of creating the authorization and the safe harbor and giving an avenue of a little bit more certainty to researchers to report their vulnerabilities and creating those bridges between companies and between researchers. And we know the community cares about it. Notably, of course, there are still issues, and I think my fellow peers today on the agenda have shared some of their perspectives around this. But the fact that we were able to create those crowdsourced systems and include that language around authorization directly in contracts has enabled many around the world to, for the first time, utilize their skills with more certainty, with more legalities being ensured. And I got inspired by researchers like Jay Cable, who I know he's presenting here as well, that really said very explicitly the fact that I don't have to hide it, the fact that I have this construct of authorization to rely on is helping me, is inspiring me to report those issues. And this is not, of course, anecdotal evidence from great researchers like Jack. This is also coming out from empirical research. So actually, we have a lot of academic research in this domain and surveys done by think tanks like the CDT, but also by agencies like NTIA already in 2015 that tells us that this issue of potential concerns around legal liability is affecting the community. And notably, this early research from 2017, which is a survey with more than 400 researchers, already conveyed that more than 60% of the researchers noted this issue of the threat of legal action was something that was standing between them and reporting the vulnerability to the vendor. And all this research we've been building off in the past years has cultivated this momentum around what can be done in contracts, what can be done in terms of use in the private ordering landscape in terms of including that authorization. Now, it's not just, of course, this issue of the legal implication. We also have the broader important narrative around the importance of communications and trust and expectations. And this is also coming through these surveys. Now, interestingly, and this is a paper that I started when I was at Berkeley and was recently published. We also know that the common reason from that survey of leaving a bug bounty, of actually leaving a bug bounty you're already participating in, and this is not a vulnerability disclosure program, this is an incentivized program, was related to communication issues. So we know it's not just about the legal landscape, it's also about this notion of trust. And this is something I'm personally still devoting a lot of time on working on. And if you specifically look at the safe harbor, some of this, more recent research talks about the fact that the legal safe harbor is actually a consideration when bug hunters are looking at which programs to work with, which programs to collaborate, where they're going to devote their energy when it comes to bug bounty programs. We don't have this research, by the way, for vulnerability disclosure program. We have it for bug bounties, and it's still kind of a lower rank, but this is a very small sample. And I encourage you researchers to participate in this kind of empirical research that is being conducted, and you have here the link on the bottom if you want to collaborate with the academics that are leading this kind of research. So the bottom line is that we know the community cares about it, and this is a critical issue to address. But not just the community, policymakers care about this as well. So one of the things we are noticing, and I think Harley gave a very extensive overview of the most recent development, including the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act, including the CISA-BOD and the implementation of the CISA-BOD, including the work by NIST in the area of IoT that is referencing coordinated vulnerability disclosure. We are noticing that the policymakers are actually addressing and recognizing these concerns. And this is really tied to the global, I would say, momentum around more and more regulation being proposed around the issue of coordinated vulnerability disclosure. I will share here a number of examples, but Harley really gave an extensive overview, including some of the global developments with the NIS directive in Europe, with the certification developments in Europe. But what's interesting is that we are starting to see with this collaboration around this issue of the safe harbor and with the growing attention to the concern, policymakers including in their commentation this concern. So for example, the CISA-BOD, the BOD from November 2020, that talks about this issue of how federal agencies should go about on creating vulnerability disclosure program, specifically calls out the potential legal concerns of the community and includes that language around addressing legal implication. And that's the momentum that we are seeing around the safe harbor, no longer just a discussion around industry, but rather policymakers recognizing these concerns. And of course, this is a very positive development, but the work continues. And I think this momentum is only going to grow because we're seeing more attention to vulnerability disclosure across the board. And this is tied to policy conversation around IoT security, around supply chain security. And it's not just in the regulatory landscape in terms of legislation, it's also coming in the international standards. And just to give you some examples on how really the policymakers are being very concrete about this, I think Harley mentioned already one of the proposals in the area of consumer smart products. It started with IoT. The recent consultation already expanded a little bit. And basically the UK government calling explicitly the importance of having a public point of contact, a vulnerability disclosure program for IoT consumer products, consumer smart products. At this stage, that's the consultation manufacturers. Seeing that policymakers putting more attention to this. And one of the considerations, if you look at the documentation kind of in more detail, is they are talking about also the importance of facilitating those bridges between the community and between organizations. And of course, this is not a new phenomena. Already in 2000, early on, years ago, and this is a slide that started, from a 2017 presentation, many organizations across government agencies, across bodies have recognized the importance of having those capabilities around vulnerability disclosure. And in fact, one of the interesting, I would say, developments is from the FTC that together with many other circumstances and depending on the case have suggested in the past that failure to maintain an adequate process for receiving and addressing security vulnerability reports from security researchers, from external parties, could be potentially, again, with all these different circumstances, an unreasonable practice under Section 5. So with all this attention to really facilitating vulnerability disclosure program and with the rise of proposed regulations requiring to facilitate disclosure programs, what can we do in contracts? What can we do in this landscape of the standardized language of terms of use? And this is really my prior work that I started at Berkeley 2016 to 2000. Recognizing that there could be some complexities with reform, the focus there was coming together the community and create a set of common language around a safe harbor. And this is the first project, Legal Bug Bounty, that we started at the time. But the DOJ, and Harley mentioned that as well, the DOJ have actually they have come forth with a number of key documentations supporting security researchers and supporting the community. Harley spoke about their comments on the DMCA proceedings for the good faith security research exemption. But another very important development was the fact that in 2017, they actually published a framework that includes considerations on how you go about design a vulnerability disclosure program. This was non-binding and really a set of considerations, but they explicitly called out this issue of addressing in the language what are potential implications in terms of the legal landscape of reporting, what we call quote unquote a safe harbor. That was again 2017, the same time I'm talking at DEF CON and sharing my research, but this development has really cultivated the industry momentum around the growing recognition of the importance of the safe harbor provisions and the standardized landscape. So after this, I continue my mission in kind of facilitating the message around the importance of and the opportunity by addressing the policy landscape using contractual language. And I go to a lot of conferences and I continue to get inspired and cultivated by the community support. And really this is the big message here. Policy is not just about, companies. It's not just about policymakers. It's about all of us coming together. It's about that dialogue where we create those mechanisms, we build those bridges to move forward conversations around these critical issues. And this is around 2018, we have the Legal Bug Bounty proposed language kind of floating out there. I start talking with a lot of companies, and really Dropbox among the first to adopt a safe harbor in 2019, cultivating this momentum. And they specifically get acknowledged by prominent researchers saying, this safe harbor movement is a good thing. I will be hacking on your program code because of it. So the community comes together and supports this momentum, and more companies joins us. And this is the example from Tesla. In fact, it's an interesting story. It's how I got my first challenge coin from Elon Musk, which I believe there are only 20 or 30 there, not because I hacked a Tesla, but mostly because they figure out that this idea of having a safe harbor in their bug bounty language is a good one. And they actually added even language about the fact that potential, if you're a good faith security researcher that is approved under the bug bounty program, and something happens to your Tesla and you've been operating under the policy, they actually waive the warranty limitations. There is a lot of nuance there. I encourage you go test that and look at that language out. But that's what this was a real novelty when it comes to the bug bounty language landscape. And it's no longer just about the safe harbor. It's actually about potential warranty issues, because Teslas are a very expensive device, right? And that cultivated another effort, which you're going to hear a lot more about today, which is Disclose.io. And Disclose.io came about again from great collaboration of the platform stepping in, and here specifically Casey and Backrowd stepping in, but also HackerOne. At the time, they changed their default language, and that created a lot of adoption of safe harbors throughout hundreds and thousands of programs. So with this support coming from the major bug bounty companies, with the supports of the platforms, we were able to create this effort, Disclose.io, that talks about standardized language. It's not legal advice. People are encouraged to, go about and seek their own advice and think about the unique considerations of the organization, but it's a starting point. And the safe harbor notion and the concept of how do we address and bring more clarity around the legal issues was the motivation behind it. And you're going to hear more about it today from Casey and from Chloe and others. But that enabled us to take, something that I started and was pretty small at the time, that had the support of a number of prominent programs, and really create a big momentum around it. And that's the story of Disclose.io. And for me, really my personal stories to share here is that collaboration is really the key for all of this. If you would tell me, years ago, that what started as a paper from 2017 and an idea of a doctoral student would be informed from so many lenses, from so many contributions, would be cultivated by this momentum, and we would reach to the point that we have today hundreds and thousands of safe harbors deployed out there, including by the big companies. I would be, I might have been skeptical, but it is because of the collaboration. It is because of the community coming together. We were able to effect this change. We were able to move it along. And a lot of the people involved are people speaking today. And, Chloe has moved this effort along. Casey has moved this effort along, and many others that have contributed along the way. And this is really the call to action. As we are thinking about these issues, as we are thinking about building those bridges between the security research community, addressing the evolving policy landscape as it changes, we will need to continue and work on this collaboration. And, in fact, this is part of my work at Intel. I haven't spoken about Intel a lot today, but one of the reasons that I'm really passionate about my work and I'm really inspired about my work, because I am focusing on building those bridges. And we do have a bug bounty. It does have language about addressing potential legal implications. And I invite you to hack our systems according to the policy, according to the bug bounty and the vulnerability disclosure program, and report issues to us. But above all, I invite you to continue this collaboration and participate in the conversation and share from your perspective, because I think it was only because of that collaboration, that cultivation that we have received, that energy that we have received from security research, from companies, from everybody coming together, we were able to create that momentum around safe harbor. And the safe harbor is not, it's not the perfect solutions. There are still issues out there, and we recognize that. But the main point is that we will need to continue and work on that collaboration. So with that, I would like to wrap it up. I'm going to be around for questions. And I think, the entire set of perspectives that was brought today by many others can really also inform, what we should be doing next. So thank you so much. Feel free to ping me on Twitter, and I will try to hang around on Discord. And thanks for supporting this.
Thank you so much, Amit, and thank you everybody for joining. And as usual, please join the conversation in Discord, as Amit mentioned. The information is in the bottom of the screen, in the description, whether you're in YouTube or on Twitch. And thank you again for supporting us again, Amit, and really good to see you. We're going to go in a break right now.